Hi there. My name is Jennifer, and I am here to help you understand the more subtle forms of harassment and bullying that can take place at work. Feel free to take notes, but remember that you can watch this video as many times as you like. It's fair to say that most people can easily recognize the more obvious forms of harassment and bullying at work. But what about the more subtle forms of harassment and bullying that can take place in a work environment? Notwithstanding the ethical and legal reasons to eradicate harassment and bullying at work, being able to feel safe at work is a key driver of employee engagement. And it's been accepted for a long time now that low employee engagement erodes levels of productivity and reduces levels of customer service. And let's not forget the cost, time, and effort spent on tribunal claims and the reputational damage these may cause. Dignity at work, and by this I mean treating people with respect, is very important. No ifs, no buts. First, let's cover off the legal stuff. To clarify, this is how harassment and bullying at work is defined in UK law. Harassment and bullying is unwanted conduct related to a relevant protected characteristic, which has the purpose or effect of violating an individual's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for that individual. This is the definition prescribed by the Equality Act 2010. The Worker Protection Act 2023, which is an amendment to the original Equality Act, came into force on 26 October 2024, and this now places a legal duty on employers to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment of their employees. This duty is anticipatory, meaning that employers now need to proactively prevent harassment rather than just addressing it after it occurs. For example, this includes a need to provide training for employees on what constitutes sexual harassment and how to report it. But of course, harassment and bullying at work is not just about sexual harassment. It covers all the types of behaviors that can make people feel uncomfortable at work and whatever type of business you are in. However, not all forms of harassment and bullying at work are obvious. Therefore, it's important to be able to recognize the types of behaviors that are less apparent. We describe these as the more subtle forms of harassment and bullying at work. Bullying may be characterized as offensive, intimidating, malicious, or insulting behavior, and abuse or misuse of power through means that undermine, humiliate, denigrate, or injure the recipient. So now let me explain the different types of the not-so-obvious behaviors that can be considered as being harassment and bullying. First, let's talk about meetings when people are continually being cut off before they have finished speaking. Of course, this may be a bad habit or simply a lack of self-awareness, but consistently repeating this behavior can be perceived as being harassment and bullying. Receiving criticism that is unwarranted runs the risk of that person perceiving themselves as being harassed or being bullied. There are benefits to providing negative feedback, but the feedback message has to be given in a proper way. Somebody taking credit when and where it is not due can also be perceived as harassment and bullying towards the person who genuinely deserves the praise and/or recognition. Withholding or hiding information can also be perceived as harassment and bullying. Let's face it, knowledge is power, yet sharing knowledge is empowering. Deliberately delaying and blocking progress of a piece of work, a work project, or even career progression can be viewed as harassment and bullying at work. Not responding to phone calls, voicemails, emails, meeting requests, and even just giving someone the silent treatment runs the risk of being identified as harassment and bullying too. Refusing requests for help or not intervening when it's appropriate to do so can also be an indicator of harassment and bullying. Letting a colleague struggle without offering help is an example of passive-aggressive behavior. The same goes for intentional exclusions in conversations, meetings, or when giving praise and recognition. Where most organizations have collaboration and teamwork on their organizational values, this type of behavior is clearly at odds with the desired workplace culture. Playing team members off against each other is another power play that has negative consequences and is counterproductive in terms of teamwork. Game playing has no place in today's modern workplace, and this kind of manipulation can also be viewed as harassment and bullying. Unrealistic objectives, goals, and expectations that set work colleagues up for failure are another example where people can feel put upon. Goals and objectives need to be agreed. We recommend following the SMART process for setting goals and task objectives. This is by making sure that goals and objectives are always specific, motivational, attainable, relevant, and trackable. Putting blame on others can be another form of workplace bullying and harassment. A blame culture is unproductive anyway, but when blame is focused on an individual, this becomes personal. Finally, last but by no means least, being excluded from work-based social events is another form of harassment and bullying. Giving work colleagues the opportunity to opt in as well as opt out is a far more adult-to-adult approach. Freezing people out, or even choosing work-related social events that would deliberately exclude others, risks harassment and bullying being perceived. Of course, isolated incidents do not always constitute harassment and bullying at work. However, being able to identify patterns of these types of behaviors and knowing how to address these sorts of issues is really important. I hope that you have found this video useful. Our Dignity at Work training is very popular with our clients, providing lots of video content and case studies that support the creation of a modern workplace culture and environment. Contact us if you'd like more information on this or on any of our other leadership, employee engagement, or customer excellence training and coaching. We'd love to help.